Jason, what do we got coming up, buddy?
Well, we're kicking it over to Dean Minuto. We are starting off with really someone we don't do repeat sessions. That just doesn't happen. Like we don't bring the speakers back for a kind of like a highlight sort of reel. But Dean did such an amazing job last year in Denver. He had a standing ovation. People bum rushed the stage to get some of his pieces of material that he had there, and he's going to be talking about how we're not necessarily starting over due to this pandemic, but we're starting different. And he has some really cool stuff that he wants to be able to share with you to talk about how we can kind of get to understand our brains a little bit better and the decisions that we make and how you can control some of those things and do a better job. How about that? So without further ado, we'll turn it over to Dean Minuto.
How awesome is that? Jason, thank you so much. Jason, Craig, JW Cole family, I am so glad to be back. I don't know about you guys. Let me use some words to describe this summer. How about chaos? How about disruption? How about fight, flight, freeze? This lockdown has put us all in an incredibly challenging state. Today I'm going to talk about how we can have a sense of direction again, how we can use the brain's own GPS during times of chaos and disruption. So for those of you who have been through my sessions in the past, you know that I teach courses summarizing the brain's own shortcuts, and Jason and Craig have brought me in several times over the course of the last year to share these learnings to help you make more of a difference in your world. If you understand the shortcuts that the brain uses, whether it's with yourself, whether it's with your family, whether it's with your employees, your team, especially with our customers, we can help people make faster decisions. So I've put together a series that I refer to as the Essentials. These are the Essentials of Yes. And recently I've been calling the program Starting Different. I actually coined this term more than a year ago before the lockdown. We're never starting over, we're always starting different. Every day is an opportunity for us to take our learnings and start different. Every interaction with customers, with ourselves. I had my artist put together a button, which you see here on the screen. It's actually a start button, and it's also a sunrise. And I want you guys to think about this as we go through, because every presentation I give, I start with a question about the brain. Here's the question for today's session. What if there was a button in the brain that you could push to shut off stress and anxiety for yourself, for your customers, even for your family? Especially in the chaotic times that we're in, help you find your way. We often get lost, especially in chaotic times, in times of disruption. Here's the example. And by the way, for those of you who are on the webcast that I gave way back in, I want to say it was March, April, May timeframe, right when this lockdown started, right when the disruption started, I had gone for a walk in my neighborhood. Before the webcast, I've been living in this neighborhood, walking this walk almost every day for over a year. Because it was a time of disruption, because my brain wasn't operating correctly, I actually got lost in my own neighborhood. I looked up in the middle of the walk, and I had no idea where I was. I was in a part of the neighborhood I'd never been in before, and I had no idea how to get back. And I started freaking out. All of those bad fight or flight chemicals, that primitive part of our brain when we feel like we're being attacked. Took a deep breath in, exhaled out, said the word relax, and asked myself, if the person I love the most were in this situation right now, if my daughter, Devin, you guys know I call her Birdie, if Birdie was in this situation, lost in her own neighborhood, what would I tell her to do? And I imagined that I would tell her to pick up her phone, which by the way was on my arm because I was listening to music, and open up the GPS and find her way home. Easy, right? What if there was a GPS in your brain that you could use in situations like that, just like I used my iPhone? What if that GPS not only could help you find your way back home, but could get you back into the zone where you're actually feeling the way you love, where you're at your highest performance, the zone which is your best and highest purpose. Here, I'm going to read a quote to you. I'm going to read a quote to you because the goal of this GPS is to get you to this zone. I have a dear friend who's had 3 PBS specials. His name is Dr. Bill Crawford. By the way, I just shared with you as an example one of the ways Bill teaches us to calm down, the same way they teach the Navy SEALs. Breathe, relax, and then present a higher level question. In my case, what would I tell the person I love the most? But here's a quote for knowing what to do next when you're lost, knowing what to trust. That thing which is your highest purpose, your reason for being here, your why, that is the source of truth and wisdom for you, dwells forever at the center of your being. I'm going to share with you a tool today to help you focus on what's at the center of your being. Any thought, emotion, or action that takes you away from that center can neither be truthful nor wise. Any thought, emotion, or action that takes you closer to that center actually takes you closer to the reason that you're here, your best and highest purpose. So, before we get into this, Jason is sitting over here in the corner, but I'm not supposed to look at him, but he's going to hand me a brain. Okay, I'm gonna have Jason hand me a brain.
There you go, Dino.
Okay, we're gonna remind ourselves of a couple of facts from the world of brain science. Okay, I want you guys to remember that the brain is predictable. If I open up this person's brain, and if we actually take his brain out of his head, or her brain out of her head, I'll point out a couple of things. The brain is only 2 to 3% of your body's mass, but it uses 25% of your body's energy. It's the most energy consumptive organ in your body. And it has really only 2 goals, which I'm going to walk you through in a minute. Because of those 2 goals, the brain is predictable. In any situation, it's trying to do 2 things. Number 1, it's trying to keep you alive. And number 2, it's trying to use as little energy as possible to achieve the first goal. Those are the brain's 2 goals. The brain is predictable. And we know that there's shortcuts the brain uses, and I'm going to remind you of some of them today because psychologists have documented more than 188 of them. But I'm going to give you a really simple way to remember them today, and I'm going to give you 5 that you can use immediately, especially in chaotic times. Okay, so number 1, the brain is predictable. Number 2, the brain likes predictable. Remember, the brain's goal is to keep you alive, so the brain is constantly scanning the environment, folks. It's looking for cues, it's looking for evidence, it's looking for shortcuts, but especially it's looking for patterns. This summer, all of our patterns got messed up. I was telling the professionals who are recording us here today, you know, I've been on the road for almost 30 years, 27 years as a professional speaker. I spent this entire summer sequestered on that bench behind my house here on St. Pete Beach. Now, there's worse places to get sequestered, I'll tell you that, but I was completely alone. My daughter was up in the Philadelphia area. Guys, I hadn't gone more than 15 days without seeing Birdie since she was born, and she's 21 years old. I went 6 months without seeing my daughter. Listen, I did a lot of thinking this summer. And I want to ask you guys, before we get into this session, I want you guys to consider a question, because I want you to think deeply about giving yourself a gift, your kids a gift, the people in your lives a gift. Here's a question I want you to ask yourself. I sat on this bench and I asked, what would I say to myself at 21 years old if I was sitting on this bench? What would be the biggest learnings that I'd want to share? And guys, there's 2. There's 2 huge learnings in the form of 2 pieces of paper. Here's the 2 pieces of paper I would have given myself at 21 years old, guys. Number 1, I would have handed myself a permission slip. And number 2, I would have handed myself a non-compete. Let's talk about the permission slip. As I handed myself the permission slip, I would have looked at myself and said, you have permission to make mistakes. No one ever gave me permission to make mistakes. We're gonna make mistakes. For those of you who have team who work for you, I want you to understand that in disruptive times, we're not always operating at our optimum brain capacity. We make mistakes. We're going to be making more of them for as long as we continue to be in this COVID-type situation that we've been in. I want you to give your team permission to make mistakes. Number 2, I wish someone had handed me a non-compete and said, Dino, I need you to sign this. You're not going to compete with anyone else in the world. You only need to compete with yourself. And as long as you've given yourself permission to make mistakes, as long as you learn from them, and as long as you're getting better, then you don't have to worry about competing. It's not about winning and losing, guys. This is something that I've realized this summer. There's always going to be someone ahead. There's always going to be someone behind. So don't compete. Focus on yourself. If someone's ahead, what can we learn from them? What can we learn from that worthy adversary that we can apply? If we're behind, right, that's an opportunity for us to improve. And I think a lot of this has to do with reframing, which is a concept that I talk about in my course. But once again, it's okay to screw up, and don't compare yourself to others. I'm going to reframe the word failing. I'd like you to write the word failing down on a sheet of paper, and I'm going to give you a new definition for it. Failing stands for find an important lesson, invite needed growth. At the end of every day, I want you to consider asking yourself 2 questions. What did I do well today? And what will I do differently tomorrow? Not what did you do wrong, what will you do differently tomorrow? I have a lot of friends who are authors. I have a lot of friends who come out of the military. I have a friend who's a Top Gun fighter pilot. The fighter pilots in the Top Gun program follow a practice that's called debriefing after every flight. And it's the same 2 questions. What did we learn? And what are we going to do differently next time? A mistake is actually a success in that it teaches us something that we didn't know before that. My friend Bill Wittich wrote a great book a few years ago. The book is called Fail More. And here's a quote from Bill's book from page 28. Failure is a word that lacks power unless you give it meaning. So we're always moving forward, we're always improving, and I want you to give yourself permission to be yourself. Individuals need to focus on who they are. That's your values, folks. I want you to connect those values with specific behaviors that generate customer experiences for your customers. So this would be an example. I've put together a list of 13 of these specific behaviors so that I can send one out a week to folks who are on my mailing list. 13 weeks times 4 is 52. So we go through this list 4 times a year. Behavior number 7, which I sent out last week, if you're on my list, talks about authenticity being a superpower. We need to be ourselves, and according to Harvard, a study that was published in February of this year, entrepreneurs who are themselves, when they make presentations to funding sources, are 3 times more likely to be successful receiving that funding. In other words, you're far more influential when you're yourself. So number 1, I want you to not focus on catering to anyone. I want you to focus on being who you are. From a brain standpoint, it's way easier. We're going to talk about brain energy. We're going to talk about something called cognitive costs today. It's way less costly for you when you're actually authentic. And if being honest, if being truthful is a value that you have in your family or in your organization, then we should embrace the differences among us. So 3 times more effective, it's also SMART. This is the acronym that I'm going to have you write down. I'm going to have you take out a couple of sheets of paper in a moment, and on one of those sheets of paper, we're going to write down the word SMART. We're not there yet, okay, but we're going to get there. Okay, so 2 tips already. Number 1, give yourself permission, give yourself and your team permission to make mistakes. Sign a non-compete so that you just focus on yourself. Something I've seen, especially if you have teenagers at home, folks, if you think this summer is tough for us as adults, imagine how tough it is for them, seeing all their friends on social media, feeling that they're missing out, feeling that their friends' lives are better than theirs. This is a message we need to send to our kids, okay? What they see out there isn't real, and during this lockdown, we've all felt maybe that we're a little bit behind, okay? I'm going to give you a caution also here about this behavior. It seems like, as a music fan, at 52 years old, I'm now understanding lyrics I never understood when I first heard them. And there's a Yes song where they sing, "Don't surround yourself with yourself." Well, I didn't understand that until this summer. Let me tell you, you don't want to surround yourself with Dino 100% of the time, okay? It's good to surround yourself with others and to surround yourself with diverse people. So, smart leaders make better decisions, achieve extraordinary results. The focus of my program is to give you guys things you can apply today to help you improve the experience you create for your customers. It's not about making a commission, it's about making a difference. So my goal is to help you guys do that. And the numbers speak for themselves. The math around improvement says this: if you improve only 1% a day, in 70 days, you're twice as good as you have today. So let's see if I can help you guys find that 1%, okay? I'm going to take my jacket off. We're going to talk about a couple of words here, because this is about accountability and chaos. So what do we mean by the word accountable? A synonym for accountable is responsible. And this is the one that I'm going to kind of hang my hat on for this talk. You are responsible, meaning able to respond. It's what separates us from the animals. We have the ability to choose our response. So let me go back to the brain science. Remember, there's only two things, only two you need to know about everyone's brain. Two goals the brain has. The first is to survive, and the second is to save energy. In any situation, your customer's number one question is, what's in it for me? That's their first goal, to keep them alive. The second goal, to use as little energy as possible to stay alive, to figure what's in it for me. So as the brain processes information in the environment, the brain looks for shortcuts. Scientists call those shortcuts cognitive biases. If you guys were to look that term up on the internet, you would find this codex. There's 188 shortcuts, 108 cognitive biases. I'll give you an example, and I'm Jason. All right, so I gave a gift to Craig as I came in. And the reason that I would give someone a gift is because I want to connect with them, because I value them. And there's a concept called reciprocity that says when we give someone a gift, they feel pressure to what, Jason? To reciprocate, to give back. Not that I'm expecting Craig to give something back, but I want him to know I appreciate. So I gave him a gift that I wanted him to display here in this office setting. This is one of 188 cognitive biases. Human beings feel pressure to reciprocate when we do things that they find to be honest and of value, okay? There's 188 of these. I summarize them in my course. I call them brain whispers, because the brain is always listening for these things. The brain is looking for shortcuts to keep it alive, and I say that there's 7 of them, which I refer to as the magnets. Motion, ask, give, which I've just mentioned to you, nice, evidence, trust, and supply. While today we won't have time to go through all 7, I'm going to talk about 5 of them, and I'm going to give you an acronym to remember them. So I'd like you to take out 2 sheets of paper, okay? On the first sheet of paper, I'd like you to draw a line vertically from the top to the bottom and horizontally across the middle on one of those sheets of paper. I'm going to draw out for you guys the brain's GPS. If we are in times of disruption and the brain doesn't know which way to go, like I was lost in that neighborhood. Some of you may feel lost right now with your clients, with your businesses, wondering which way to go. The brain has its own GPS. The first thing I'd like you to do, in the center of these 2 lines, the center of your being, we're going to draw a triangle. A triangle, the Greek symbol for delta, for difference, for change. We are here to make a difference in the world, whether it's for our family, whether it's for our customers, whether it's for our team. That is the center of what we do. Remember, the brain has 2 goals. First goal, cognitive bias, is to keep us alive. Let's call this gain. High gain or low gain. Low gain would be things that put us at risk or cause a loss to us. Second line, the horizontal line. The brain's goal is to use as little energy as possible to stay alive. So we're going to label this line pain. This would be high pain. This would be low pain. On the top, by gain, I'm going to put a $sign. By low pain, I'm going to put a smile. Cognitive biases are to stay alive. Cognitive costs suggest the brain loves things that are easy, that use less energy. So if that triangle, and I'm going to go back to the screen here, is the center of what we do, I want you to note GPS, a gain pain scale, which is what I'm creating here for you. And we'll have 4 boxes. Box number 1 would be here. High gain, low pain. I want you right now to think about, let's just think about your customer base. You have clients who generate more for you than others. They would be high gain. You also have clients who are easier for you to work with. They put a smile on your face. Those would be quadrant 1 clients. This is the yes zone. This, by the way, is the zone you need to be in if you want to achieve your highest and best purpose in life. This right here, quadrant 1, is what I would label as your true north. Now, Jason, we got 4 quadrants here. What would you label as quadrant 4? The quadrant 4 would be the no-fly zone. What would you think, Jason?
Lower right corner.
Down here, this is your no-fly zone. Carlos, this is the zone of ex-wives and ex-girlfriends, Carlos. No, I'm kidding. So we all have done business with people who would be quadrant 4. Now we got some options, Jason. If someone is low gain to us and causing us pain, we actually have several options. What's our first option? What would you think, guys? Jason, what do you think?
Cut 'em loose.
Well, that's a terrible option. The divorce option, to cut them loose, is an option, but that's not how we live that's how we want to live our lives. So we actually have 2 way more powerful options. You know, I counsel many people who ask me when they see the great relationship that I have with Birdie's mom, and we split up when Devin was 5, but we've had fully shared custody, and I recognize, even though we're not together, we're going to be in each other's lives forever. So my question to myself early on, both in life and in business, is if I want to spend my time in zone 1, and I have a person that right now is in zone 4 for me, I have 2 other options other than completely get rid of them. One option is, can I make them easier to work with? Another option is, can I generate more gain from them? But in order to do this, folks, you would actually have to identify what are the gains you get and what are the pains that are created. So here's an exercise for you. On this sheet of paper, and this was just to reflect that that's the second sheet of paper, I'd like you, in this quadrant, to create 2 lists. The first list, I'd like you to make a list of 3 things, 3 metrics that are gain metrics for you. Doesn't actually have to be dollars. Like a gain metric for me is someone who would engage me for multiple sessions. Jason and Craig at JW Cole, they didn't engage me to speak once. They engaged me to speak 7 times this year. That's high gain. Another gain for me is I know that I make a difference for them and for their customers. That's high gain for me. By the way, JW Cole, I don't have to ask to be paid. They pay me up front. That's high gain for me. So I know that there are certain metrics. Let me ask you, if you're watching this, have you identified what your 3 gain metrics are? Now let me ask you, can you identify what your 3 pain metrics are? What are the things that make clients easier to work with? JW Cole is a quadrant 1 client. They're not my largest client by dollar volume, but they're my most enjoyable client because of the relationship I have with them. I think of these folks as family. They treat me like family. Craig and Jason and everyone I've ever interacted here with treats me like family. That's one of my gain points. Something I was saying to Joe, who's running the video shoot today, when he asked me if I was happy to get off the road, I said, no, I love being on the road because I only stay places I want. One of the reasons that I love JW Cole is they're here in Tampa, which is another ease point for me. So you guys got to identify what would make someone quadrant 1. let me just pause here for a second and say, this is where you will be in the zone in your life. If you can be doing business with clients who are in this quadrant, you're in the zone. Okay? Let me flip this, okay? And I just took a peek at Jason there because Jason, as someone who engages me, who buys from me, is going to rate his speakers on the same scale that I'm using to rate him as a customer, he's going to use to rate me as someone he buys from. Folks, your customers are asking these same two questions. What's in it for me and is it easy for me? JW Cole has other great speakers they work with. Jason he's going to introduce me to this gentleman from Ottawa. I can't wait to meet him. I hope he's watching this video because Jason's already excited me about him. The question is, how do we both remain quadrant one? Well, the way we do that is we continue to ask Jason, we continue to ask Craig, what's in it for them? How can we make it easier for them? Because not only do I want them as my client, I want them to see me as quadrant one, as someone they work with. Does that make sense to you, folks? Okay, take out your second sheet of paper. Take out your second sheet of paper because I've given you a little tool to use here today. And what I'd like you to do on the second sheet of paper is I'd like you to write down the word SMART across this second sheet of paper. SMART is an acronym. Stands for 5 shortcuts, 5 ways that you can create forward motion with clients. 5 cognitive biases that are forcing mechanisms. 5 cognitive biases that I consider force multipliers. By the way, when I think about this zone, I call this living in FM. If I'm in that zone, I'm creating forward motion for myself. If I'm in that zone, I'm creating forcing mechanisms around things that I love to do, and they're force multipliers for me. And folks, there's 5 that I'm going to talk to you about today. So let me define them for you right here. Because SMART is an acronym that stands for supply, motion, ask, relate, and trust. These are cognitive biases. Cognitive biases are the shortcuts that people use to help them stay alive, number 1. Number 2, it's a way for them to save energy. These shortcuts actually help them make decisions faster. So now on your second sheet of paper, we've written this word SMART, and I've outlined the 5 shortcuts, supply, motion, ask. Let me just start with the first one, supply. Supply is the most powerful of the 5 shortcuts. Studies have shown that you can increase compliance to a request to anyone, including yourself, by 4 times with the use of supply issues. The 3 primary supply issues, folks: limited numbers, deadlines, and penalties. I'm going to focus right here on you guys for a second. Right now, people are anxious. Time. My mentor, I had a conversation with in the summer. My mentor is in his late 70s. He said, Dino, the days are really long, but the weeks are really short. The longer you make someone wait to hear from you, the more their anxiety goes up. And by the way, in times of chaos, as anxiety goes up, people can make more mistakes. As time goes up, risk increases during times of chaos. The military has understood this. For an entire generation of military commanders, I have a friend who's a retired general. As I shared with you earlier, I have a friend who's a jet pilot. The military has shortcuts that they use that apply supply as a forcing mechanism. I'll give you an example. And Jason, you weren't in the military, were you? No, but you've seen in the movies when an officer gives an order, folks, and the enlisted man says, "Hoo-ah!" I don't know if you recognize hoo-ah is actually an acronym. It stands for heard, understood, and acknowledged. Let me share with you a behavior to help you manifest this as a best practice. The concept is immediately respond to people when they request something from you. They need to hear your hoo-ah. They need to hear you say, I received this, I'm working on it. Even if you don't have an answer, don't make them wait. The longer they wait, their anxiety goes up. You need to understand that the brain it's really interesting how the brain processes energy over time. And I'm going to give you a second tip here under supply. There is a curve that I've shared with you guys in prior presentations called the curve of human attention. And it basically says that over time, people can either be at high attention or low attention. But what we know is this: the brain will not stay at high attention for the entire time someone presents or the entire time someone speaks to them. The brain is predictable. When you start a presentation, when you start any event, the brain sparks. High attention. So Jason, you know that I'm a music fan, and I've shared this story with Jason before, but for those of you on the screen, a few years ago I said to my daughter that Fleetwood Mac was coming to Philadelphia, and I got his ticket. She said, Fleetwood Mac? That's one of Grandpa's bands, Daddy. Why would I want to go see Fleetwood? Okay, Bertie, so she didn't want to come with me. Then on her own, she discovered a singer named Stevie Nicks. So 2 years later, I got tickets to go see Stevie. Now you guys, anyways, Dad said it, so she wasn't interested. But now she's in love with Stevie Nicks. So I buy Stevie Nicks tickets. That summer, Stevie Nicks sold out every arena she played in, folks. She's amazing. She's in her 70s. She's beautiful. We waited for 2.5 hours before Stevie came out. All of a sudden, Stevie comes out, and what's the crowd do, Jason, as soon as they see Stevie? They're all on their feet cheering. They're going crazy. Now, Jason, do they stay on their feet cheering for the entire 2 hours that Stevie sings? No. They almost immediately start sitting down because they're 70 years old as well. Okay. Stevie sings for 2 hours, folks. Right about here, she says something. She says, thank you. I've been given the 12-minute warning by Jason. I hope you guys are getting value from this. Right here, Stevie Nicks says to the Philadelphia audience, ladies and gentlemen, you've been so great. I felt like I've been with family. I felt like I've been telling stories in my living room. Can I share with you one more song? But one more song? Jason, what's the crowd do now? They go crazy again. Guys, I want you to take a look at this. You have 2 moments of power in any presentation: the beginning and the end. I want you to think about your next interaction. If it's a presentation, I want you to ask yourself, can I give them the bottom line up front? And can I repeat that again at the end of my time with them? The military has a concept they refer to as bluff. When officers send emails or messages to each other, they actually start the message by saying bluff, which stands for bottom line up front. It's a shortcut that says pay attention. Okay? I learned another one recently that you guys may want to use with your team. You know, people will say FYI in a note. Well, my friends in the military say FYSA. Have you heard this before, Jason? What they say is for your situational awareness. What they're doing is giving you a warning that something might be coming your way. They're not telling you what you need to do, but they're saying pay attention. Folks, when someone gives us a deadline, when someone says that there might be a penalty associated with something, our brain gets triggered because we think we're being manipulated. If someone says for your situational awareness, listen, this quote that I gave you on the car, it's only good till Saturday at noon, because that's when the Mercedes said, oh, okay, that's different. You now have a valid reason. Okay, let's move on. I talked about supply. Let me talk about the motion. Let me talk about the motion card right here. Boop, boop, boop. Motion. Motion, as a cognitive bias, is called commitment and consistency. And it basically says you are twice as likely to follow through on a commitment that you make in writing. You guys remember Sir Isaac Newton said a thing in motion tends to stay in motion? The way we get something in motion is to start making small commitments toward it. This is true for us as well. You know, before you went grocery shopping when you were a kid, your aunt, your mother, whoever told you, make a list. You never even had to take the list out of your pocket. The act of making a list actually visually imprinted your brain. So a couple of tips here on this motion card. If you want to make things easier for people and make it easier for them to move forward with you, think about taking the commitment you're asking for and breaking it up into a series of small commitments. And I want to give you a forcing mechanism to use. The words, do you have a pen and a piece of paper? I actually want you to telegraph for folks that you want them to write things down. Handwriting is active participation, and we now know that handwriting imprints the brain. How can handwriting imprint your brain? Well, because you watch yourself draw each letter. Handwriting is a way we visually imprint our brains. So, take a look at this guy right here. There's only 5 ways to get information into our brain. One of the 5 is 30 times faster than the others. We can only get information to our brain through our eyes, our ears, our nose, and our mouth. Those are the only channels by which the brain accepts outside information. 90% of everything your brain does all day is process stimuli from one of your 5 senses. Visual processing. Visuals are the king. When we write something down, we're making it visual. We're making it visual for ourselves, we're making it visual for our kids, we're making it visual for our team, and when we ask other people to write things down, we're having them make it visual for themselves. I don't know if you've seen the recent election signs, make a plan. The more of these signs I saw, I thought it actually said Michael Plan was running for office. Michael Plan. It actually says make a plan. What they're asking people to do is to commit in writing. And you know where that comes from? It comes from the most effective campaign in the history of American politics by the numbers, which was President Obama. I don't care what your politics are, folks. President Obama's re-election campaign, more people showed up and voted than have ever voted in the history of America. President Obama hired a team of brain scientists to help him get reelected. One of those brain scientists I've talked to you guys about every time I've been in front of you because he wrote this book and I worked with him for off and on for about a decade, Dr. Robert Cialdini. This is the seminal work in behavioral psychology. Cialdini in this book documents when we get people to write things down, they're twice as likely to follow through. And President Obama hired Cialdini and other brain scientists to help them in that reelection campaign. Their primary focus was tell voters to make a plan, to write down when they're going to vote and how they're going to get there. They will be twice as likely to vote if they have made a plan. Okay. You know what, let me skip down to relate and trust because I can do those fairly quickly and they're the next most powerful. By the way, I shared with you that being authentic in a presentation increases your effectiveness by 3 times. It's because we can relate with people who are being their true selves. There's three things we look for when we look to relate with someone. Remember, I call them the 3 C's. And I'm going to put a little qualification on the 4th one this time. So on your piece of paper, write down 3 C's. First C, compliment. I walked in today and Jason knows how to make deposits with me. Jason said, looking sharp, like the vest, you like the jacket. I release dopamine. That's what happens when you pay someone a compliment. Their brain releases dopamine. Remember, dopamine does the same thing in the human brain that heroin used to do in Keith Richards' brain. That's why they call it dope. Heroin, dope addicts. Dopamine, pay honest. I hope Jason was being honest. If you guys like the vest, send me a note, let me know. Okay, pay people an honest compliment. Tell your kids what they're doing well. Tell your team what they're doing well. Pay more compliments. Second C, under relate, find something in common. We like people who are like us. That's why you need to be yourself, because then you'll let people find things in common with you. And the third C is the big one. It's collaboration. It's you putting your arm around someone and saying, we're in this together. Part of collaboration is reciprocity, giving someone something, giving them information, giving them an introduction to someone, giving them an invitation to something that they would find value in attending, okay? Giving them a gift, as I did with Craig today. So those are the ways we relate to people. Where are we? Where are we, Big Joe? 2 minutes? That's not enough. Okay, we're going. Trust. Here's the thing, folks. We trust people who are honest especially about their mistakes. I know that this sounds counterintuitive. We trust sales professionals who bring up an objection or a weakness first. I know that this sounds counterproductive, but all the research has proven this out. Starting in the 1980s, when Neil Rackham studied IBM's top performers and wrote a book called Spin Selling. Neil Rackham's primary finding was that IBM's top performers never got objections from their clients because they brought them up first. In the law world, they call this stealing the thunder. And by the way, when you bring up a weakness first, you become quadrant 1 for people. You make it easier for them to figure out whether they can trust you or not. And you are high gain to them. All right, my favorite visual. Statues made by a friend of mine. I end every presentation with it. Hopefully I'm still hitting my mark here. Statue's called Self-Made Man. Artist's name is Bobby Carlyle. That's a 3-foot version of the bronze that I own. Bobby created a statue of someone carving themselves out of granite. 2 phrases. Whether you're religious or not, every religion that has a book has these 2 phrases in it, folks. Number 1, they themselves are makers of themselves. Number 2, for those who have faith, even more shall be given. Every day is a chance for you to be starting different. You're never starting over, you're starting different. The times we've been going through, we're going to look back. It's the best of times, it's the worst of times, but more importantly, it was what we made of it. I view myself as an instrument to help you guys do the work you're doing. If I can help you make more of a difference in the world, I hope you'll reach out. Let me do what I can to contribute. I said my goal was to give you things you can apply today. Jason, thanks for letting me be here. I want to thank Jason and Craig for letting me contribute. And I'll see you guys on the next interaction we have together. Cheers.